Gray light filtered through the narrow windows of Ironwood State Prison, as though even the sun was hesitant to illuminate the events unfolding within. Guards patrolled the corridors in a methodical rhythm, their footsteps echoing against concrete walls painted in a dull institutional blue. Leonard Lynn Jackson lay shackled to a steel bed in the secure wing. A single bulb overhead revealed that etched lines of exhaustion on his face. He had slept little in the past week. At sunrise, prison officials would move him to the final cell, a sterile chamber adjacent to the execution room. 2 hours after that, they planned to administer the lethal injection. No friends, no family. Only the occasional visit from Reverend Morris, the prison chaplain, had brightened Len's last few weeks. Yet he maintained one enduring wish. "I'd like to see Eclipse before I die," he repeated to the guard who stood outside his cell. Eclipse was his dog, a German shepherd he had adopted 3 years before the arrest. Len had loved that dog more than life itself. Marla Batista, the warden, stepped into view. Her posture was stiff but not unkind. "Jackson, final request or subject to approval. Bringing an animal onto prison grounds isn't standard." "We don't even know where the dog is," Len interrupted. His voice sounded scratchy, even to his own ears. "Eclipse has been with Helen Griggs, my fiancée, before all this. She still has him as far as I know." He tried to keep his tone neutral, but the H in his throat betrayed him. "Please, warden. If there's any mercy left, let me see Eclipse." She eyed him with sympathy that she tried to cloak behind the usual protocol. "I'll see what I can do, but don't get your hopes up," Len nodded. He was too tired to fight or beg. In truth, he still clung to a threat of defiance, a refusal to accept that he had murdered anyone. For 5 years, Len had shouted his innocence to anyone who would listen. After multiple appeals, no one believed him, except perhaps Reverend Morris, who admitted doubt on more than one occasion. As the warden departed, Len heard conversation outside. Another protest forming. One guard said, "Half of them think he's guilty as sin. The other half want the death penalty abolished entirely." Len shut his eyes. It didn't matter what outsiders believed. In a few hours, the needle would do its grim work. Easing himself off the bunk, he stood and felt chains clink around his ankles. With every shift of his weight, they rattled. He walked to the small window, a high rectangular slit, and tried to see the sky. A watery band of light was all that showed. Dawn was still weak, but its pinkish hue spread across the horizon. It reminded him painfully of the early mornings he used to spend walking Eclipse through the vacant streets of Redwood City. For a moment, Len could almost feel Eclipse pulling on the leash. See the German shepherd's tail wagging excitedly as they set off for the park. He recalled how the dog would run circles around him, prompting strangers to smile. Some even asked, "You train him yourself?" Proudly, Len would answer yes. The German shepherd was brilliant, eager to please. Eclipse had been more than a pet. He'd been a lifeline. A guard knocked on the door. "Jackson, time to go. They're moving you to the final holding cell." "Warden, once you prep," Len swallowed. "Am I getting my last wish?" he asked through the steel bars. The guard avoided his gaze. "All I know is they're checking with the Department of Corrections. Don't hold your breath." Nodding, Len turned around and silently offered his wrists for the cuffs. He was used to it by now. After so many years of confinement, the mechanical click of metal on metal felt almost routine. "Let's move," the guard said. Len cast one final look at that stingy band of morning light. Wondering if he'd ever see the sun fully break over the horizon again, Helen Griggs parked her pickup truck outside the small townhouse she now rented. It was just after 6 a.m., and she had been awake all night. The swirling anxiety in her chest had started ever since she saw the news broadcast. Leonard Jackson's execution was scheduled for that morning. Inside the townhouse, Eclipse lay curled on a dog with patches of fur were a bit fluffier than usual for a German shepherd his age. At the sound of Helen's footsteps, he lifted his head, his ears perked up. Eclipse had not seen Lynn since the trial 5 years ago. Helen's heart clenched at the sight of the dog's alert gaze. Eclipse was all that remained of the life she and Len had started building, an engagement ring, wedding invitations half addressed, an apartment they were about to move into. Then everything shattered the night police found Len near the murder scene and pinned the blame on him. She crouched and stroked Eclipse's head. "You miss him, don't you?" "I know you do." Despite everything, she never doubted Len's innocence. The evidence had pointed in bizarre ways. A partial fingerprint on a weapon, unconfirmed sightings from questionable witnesses, and an alleged financial motive that never made sense, but a convincingly delivered prosecution sealed Len's fate. She had spent years trying to gain traction on an appeal to no avail. Helen stood up, her eyes drifting to the pile of mail on her kitchen table. She had to remind herself. Today was the day Len was set to die by lethal injection. she'd pleaded with the new district attorney to re-examine the case. She'd tried contacting journalists. Nothing had worked. Her phone buzzed. Startled, she snatched it. The number was from Ironwood Prison. "Hello, Miss Griggs," a woman asked. The voice was calm, official. "Warden Batista here. I'm calling about Leonard Jackson's final request." Helen's skin prickled. "Is there any change? I heard the governor might." "I'm sorry," Batista cut in. "No stays or delays. The execution will move forward. But Mr. Jackson's requested to see his dog, Eclipse, one last time. He says Eclipse is in your care." Helen nearly dropped the phone. "He still wants to see Eclipse?" "Yes, we've never done this before, but I received conditional approval from the Department of Corrections. We're short on time, though." The warden sighed. "We need you and the dog here within 90 minutes, or it won't happen." Helen's pulse thudded in her ears. "I'll bring him, absolutely. We'll leave in 5 minutes." She hung up and stared at Eclipse, who was now standing tail wagging, because she was clearly excited, and dogs sensed that. But Helen also saw the apprehension in his eyes, maybe picking up on her anxiety. She tried to summon some courage. "Come on, boy. Let's go see Len." For a moment her voice wavered. She forced a brittle smile, knowing that no matter how impossible it felt, she had to do this. Helen quickly threw on a coat, grabbed Eclipse's leash, and guided him into the truck. This was everything Len had left. One final connection to a world that had once offered them both a promise of happiness. As she reversed out of the driveway, Helen felt the gnawing sense that she was driving into the darkest day of her life. The engine hummed as she sped toward Ironwood Prison, pushing the speed limit on mostly empty roads. Dawn was brightening the eastern sky. A swirl of pink and orange tinted the clouds. She risked a glance at Eclipse in the rear seat. The German shepherd stared out the window, occasionally letting out a soft whine. It was as if he, too, sensed the gravity of what awaited them. Her phone kept buzzing, calls from friends, maybe from people who saw the news. One kept buzzing, calls from friends, maybe from people who saw the news. She ignored them. Right now, only one thing mattered: honoring Len's request. It haunted her that she might arrive to find they were too late, or that something else had gone wrong. What if the warden reversed her decision at the last minute, or the dog wasn't permitted due to a technicality? Helen gripped the wheel harder. "Hold on, Len," she murmured. "Just hold on a little longer." Traffic lights gave her mostly green signals, as if the universe offered some small grace. She approached the tall fences and barbed wire surrounding Ironwood Prison with a cold dread in her stomach. 2 sets of gates parted slowly, controlled by watchful guards in a booth. When she finally pulled up, a correctional officer approached. Helen rolled down the window. "I'm here for Leonard Jackson's final request," she said, her voice trembling. "I have his dog, Eclipse." The officer checked a clipboard and waved her through. He directed her to a side entrance. She parked the truck. "Wait here," the officer said, "until we confirm everything inside." Helen reached back and gave Eclipse a comforting pat. "Just a little longer, boy. You'll see him soon," she whispered. Eclipse pressed his muzzle into her hand, as if to say he understood. She closed her eyes, imagining what it would be like to stand in front of Lynn again. How gaunt would he look? Would he still have that small dimple in his left cheek when he tried to smile? Would he still smell like the aftershave he used? Helen realized tears were streaming down her face. She wiped them, hurriedly, right now. She had to stay strong for Lindsay and for Eclipse. Then the door to the administrative wing opened, and a different guard emerged, signaling her to come. This was it. Anton Delacroix adjusted the knot of his tie in front of a mirror that reflected a man on the verge of retirement. His salt and pepper hair was cropped short, and his sharp azale eyes betrayed a lifetime of secrets. For 3 decades he served as a detective. Now, with a gold watch around the corner, he'd been saddled with a regret that didn't let him sleep well at night. A lot. He had been saddled a regret that didn't let him sleep well at night. For 5 years, a case had been gnawing at him. Len Jackson's murder conviction. Anton was the detective who led the investigation that put Len on death row. Back then, the evidence had seemed open and shut. Partial fingerprints on the murder weapon, a suspicious bank deposit near the time of the victim's death, and ambiguous eyewitness accounts that placed Lynn at the scene. But in the last 2 years, Anton's old partner had confided doubts. Something about the way certain testimonies were coached, how the victim's history vanished from official records, how certain digital traces were never pursued. The partner claimed the puzzle was never truly solved, or possibly rigged. The city believed Anton to be a hero detective, a man of unwavering justice. But as Len's execution date neared, Anton found himself visiting the dusty archives of the county courthouse at odd hours. He read transcripts, rewatched interrogation videos. Each time details pricked at his conscience. The timeline didn't perfectly align. The victim, a businessman named Raymond Kincaid, had a host of enemies, some with stronger motives than Lynn, and that suspicious bank deposit in Lynn's account, it was never fully tracked to a source. The prosecution claimed it was hush money for the murder, but no origin proof existed. Anton's cell phone chirped, snapping him back to the present. He read the text. Jackson's final appeal was denied. Execution set for 9 a.m. If there's anything left to do, do it now. The message came from a friend still inside the district attorney's office. A sense of dread tugged at Anton. He had considered stepping forward but never mustered the nerve. He'd tried quietly asking higher-ups to recheck the forensics. They brushed him off. For them, the conviction was a victory, a done deal. The city's justice system saw an open and shut case with a dangerous man locked away. After all, some of the biggest players in local government were Kincaid's cronies. Kincaid had been a real estate magnate with money in every politician's pocket. They mourned him as a saint, ignoring any possible unsavory side ventures he ran. The city wanted a scapegoat, and Lynn Jackson fit the role. Now, standing alone in his modest bedroom, Anton checked his watch at 20 a.m. He picked up a phone he rarely used, a prepaid device purchased for privacy. He dialed a number from memory. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. Yeah, came a voice, low and slightly gruff. It's Deliqua. Listen, I need you to do me a favor. We don't have much time. The call was to a contact who specialized in data retrieval. If any digital footprints existed that pointed away from Lynn's guilt, this person could find them. Perhaps it was a feeble last-ditch attempt, but Anton couldn't let this day pass without trying everything. If Lynn was executed, the detective wanted to know he'd done all he could to uncover the truth. Anton slid a gun into a leather holster beneath his jacket. Not that he expected a firefight, but old habits died hard. Driving his unmarked sedan, he left behind the quiet suburban street. The sky overhead remained overcast, smothering the city in a gray haze. As he maneuvered through morning traffic, memories of the investigation flooded his mind. He recalled the day he interviewed Lynn, a day that should have been routine. The suspect had looked genuinely bewildered, even frightened. I didn't do this. Lynn had insisted with a calmness that was either the mark of a psychopath or an innocent man who believed in fairness. Over the years, Anton had interrogated all kinds of criminals. Lynn's demeanor never quite matched the hardened or deceptive type. Pulling into a public library lot, he found the building still closed. Good. The library's Wi-Fi extended to the parking area, offering a discreet place for him to upload and download files to the digital slith on the other end of his phone. With measured haste, he transferred copies of the case records from a flash drive. He had no illusions this might be too little, too late. While he waited for his contact to confirm receipt, Anton thought about the Jackson he'd met. No prior record, honorable discharge from the military, a stable job at a security firm, then the abrupt downfall. The more Anton replied it, the more it stank of a setup. But was there a single piece of undiscovered evidence that might blow the case open? His phone vibrated. Received. Give me an hour. That was the text. Anton typed back quickly. We don't have an hour. Execution at 9. Hurry. He started the car again, heading toward the county courthouse. If by some miracle a piece of evidence surfaced that proved Lynn's innocence, Anton needed to be the one handing it to the DA or the warden. It was a slim chance, but better than helplessly standing by. The city's skyline appeared in the distance, a cluster of glass and steel glinting in subdued morning light. The same city that once hailed him as a top detective. As the minutes ticked by, Anton prayed this Hail Mary would yield something, anything, to cast doubt on the conviction. He also had a second plan in mind, a personal mission. If no digital evidence emerged, he would walk into Ironwood Prison himself, find the warden, and say, I have reasonable suspicion that we got the wrong man. It might lead to his own professional disgrace, even potential legal trouble for withholding doubts for so long. But perhaps it could buy a stay of execution or open a last-minute hearing. Time was slipping through his fingers. Anton pressed the gas pedal harder, weaving around slow cars. In the distance, the sky brightened. The clouds parted, letting a pale beam of sun break through. The detective interpreted that as a sign, faint hope in a grim situation. If that hope failed him, if the system wouldn't budge, then all he'd have left was the knowledge that he tried to save an innocent man. Even if it was far too late, Lynn Jackson was led through a series of windowless hallways until he reached the final holding cell. It was a small, antiseptic space with white, tiled walls and a glaring fluorescent light overhead. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and fear. A single observation window looked out onto the corridor, allowing guards to watch his every move. A female correctional officer, Garcia, removed his handcuffs through the door slot, giving him a momentary feeling of relief. She sat down a paper bag containing the meager last meal he'd requested. A cheeseburger with extra pickles and a soda. Not because he was hungry, but because he remembered sharing a similar fast food meal with Helen the day he adopted Eclipse. Garcia offered a stilted nod. You'll be prepped in about 30 minutes. If the warden says yes, you'll see your dog. Her voice softened. She clearly was not comfortable carrying out execution, but duty overshadowed her personal qualms. Len said, picking up the burger. He didn't unwrap it. The smell alone brought back a wave of nostalgia. Each memory was like a glass shard, slivers of a life stolen from him. He considered eating, but his stomach clenched with dread. Took a sip of soda and then placed it aside. Sitting on the narrow bunk, he stared at the opposite wall. He wondered if Eclipse would even recognize him. Maybe the German Shepherd had moved on. 5 years was a long time, yet a surge of hope fluttered in his chest. If the warden had made that call to Helen, maybe Eclipse was on his way. Maybe in these last moments, Len could feel that unconditional love once more. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Then, unbelievably, the door opened. Warden Batista entered first, her expression tense. Behind her stood Helen, holding Eclipse's leash. The moment the dog saw Len, his entire body went rigid. Eclipse let out a single loud bark, followed by a flurry of frantic tail-wagging. Len's breath caught. Eclipse bounded forward. The dog's nails clacked on the tile floor as he tried to leap onto the bunk. He let out a series of excited barks that Len recognized. Half yelp, half cry. Something the German Shepherd always did when overjoyed. A guard was about to hold the dog back, but Batista waved him off. Len, tears streaming, dropped to his knees on the floor. Hey, buddy, he whispered, hugging Eclipse around the neck. The German Shepherd was bigger now, fur fluffier. Eclipse's muzzle had a faint, white streak that hadn't been there 5 years ago. But his eyes, that striking ice blue, shone with the same adoration Len remembered. Helen stood by the doorway trembling. Len looked up at her. Helen, he murmured. No words could suffice. In a single glance he saw all the pain she had endured on his behalf. Visits she was likely forced to end. The heartbreak of losing a life they'd planned together. I tried to stop this, Helen whispered. I begged them to look again. No one would listen. I'm sorry, Len. He shook his head. Don't, you did more than anyone. Warden Batista cleared her throat. We have 15 minutes, she said, sounding far more gentle than Len had heard from her before. The chaplain will come afterward, and then the doctor. I'm sorry, Jackson. Len tried to swallow the lump in his throat. I appreciate you letting me see him, he managed to say. Helen knelt on the other side of Eclipse, who was busy licking Len's face. She reached out, and Len grasped her hand. For a moment, they simply absorbed the reality of being in the same room after so long. Neither had the words to convey that mixture of heartbreak and longing. He's still yours, Helen said softly. I never rehomed him, even though people told me it was best to move on. Len buried his face in Eclipse's fur, inhaling that warm, doggy smell that used to greet him at the door after a long shift at work. The hush in the room felt like a calm eye in the hurricane swirling outside. Crowds protesting, a lethal injection prepared, yet here for these few moments, love blossomed in raw, undeniable form. 15 minutes, repeated Batista gently, stepping back toward the corridor. Then, it's time. Helen blinked rapidly. I'll wait outside. She gave Len's shoulder a squeeze. I'll be here until... Her voice cracked. She rose, hugging herself as she exited. The door shut behind her. Len was alone with Eclipse, under the watchful eye of the warden and a guard behind glass. But it felt like solitude, a stolen oasis of humanity. The German Shepherd nuzzled him with unstoppable affection, occasionally whining and pawing at Len's arms. Len stroked behind Eclipse's ears, tears falling freely. I never stopped loving you, boy, he said. Never stopped dreaming about walking you along Redwood Creek or teaching you new tricks. You kept me going. Every time I thought about... He hesitated, remembering dark nights when thoughts of suicide had loomed. You gave me something to hold on to, Bah. Eclipse licked at Len's cheek, a soft, comforting gesture. The dog couldn't possibly understand the intricacies of wrongful conviction or last appeals, but Eclipse knew Len was hurting. That was enough. Len heard a brief knock. Time was slipping away. Each second felt like a drop of water in a desert, precious and scarce. He buried his hand in Eclipse's thick. It's not fair, he murmured. 5 years gone, I never got to prove. His throat closed. For the 100th time, he thought, I didn't kill Raymond Kincaid. No matter how many times he repeated the words, no matter how passionately he insisted, the courts never believed him. He finally rose to his feet and placed both hands on Eclipse's cheeks. The dog gazed up, ears purrs if memorizing Len's face. I love you, Len managed to say. Then, in a gesture he never wanted to make, he stood back, expecting that a guard would come for Eclipse. To his surprise, the warden's voice came through the speaker. "Mr. Jackson, your time is up. But would you like Eclipse to remain until the chaplain arrives? I can permit him inside for a few more minutes if you want him by your side." Len's chest constricted. "I'd be grateful, Mom." The warden's tone softened. "All right, but only until the chaplain, then we have to escort the dog out protocol." Len sank back onto the bunk, guiding Eclipse to sit beside him. A few minutes more. He felt gratitude that came with an undercurrent of disbelief. This was the last peaceful moment he'd ever get with a dog he loved more than his own life. He closed his eyes. If this was his final memory, at least it would be one worth clinging to in his last conscious seconds. Outside the final holding cell, Helen leaned against the wall, arms crossed tightly over her chest. She could hear nothing except distant murmurs from the administrative hallway. Occasionally, an echo of footsteps resonated. Guards, doctors, 1,000 indifferent employees going about their day. A sudden voice startled her. "Miss Griggs." It was a man's baritone, tinged with age and regret. She looked up to find a tall man with salt and pepper hair, wearing a dark suit. He moved with the cautious confidence of someone used to carrying authority. "My name is Anton Delacroix," he said, extending a hand. "I was the detective on Leonard Jackson's case." Helen stiffened. "Why would you come now? Lynn has minutes, maybe an hour left." "Isn't it too late?" He purged his lips. "That's exactly why I'm here. I think we made a mistake." Helen's throat tightened. "You think?" "You didn't say anything for 5 years." Delacroix sighed. "I've suspected for 2. I tried to pursue leads, but the department wasn't interested." He glanced at the floor, shame rising in his cheeks. "I hesitated. Didn't want to dismantle my own case without ironclad evidence." She clenched her fists, but her tiredness, her heartbreak overshadowed anger. "We have, half an hour until the lethal injection. If you're telling me this now, what can you possibly do?" He pointed to his phone. "I have a contact analyzing digital footprints from the victim's life, plus undisclosed leads that never made it to trial. I'm hoping for a miracle, some proof to at least stay the execution." He swallowed. "The real question is whether the warden will delay the procedure if I show up with suspicion." Helen forced down a surge of emotion. "Len deserves that chance," she whispered. "He's innocent. I've always known." Delacroix gave a tiny nod. "I believe he is too. Let me speak to Warden Batista." Helen followed Delacroix down the corridor. She thought about the horrors Len had endured. Isolated on death row, called a murderer by everyone who once respected him. Why didn't you come forward sooner? She wanted to scream, but she kept her focus on the present. Time was not on their side. The warden stood near a glass panel door leading to a small administrative office. She was flipping through documents on their side. The warden stood near a glass panel door leading to a small administrative office. She was flipping through documents on a clipboard. Delacroix approached, introduced himself. Batista's face drew into a stern line. "You have information that could affect this execution. Are you aware how close we are to the appointed time?" Delacroix nodded vigorously. "Close we are to the appointed time." Delacroix nodded vigorously. "Ma'am, I do. We might be dealing with manipulated evidence. If so, we cannot proceed with an irreversible sentence. I beg you to at least request a short stay from the governor's office while I confirm new findings." Batista gave him a long, piercing stare. "Detective, I can't simply take your word for it. You realize the legal channels for a stay of execution require more than the personal doubts of an investigator. My contact is verifying digital files from the victim's internal finances, Raymond Kincaid. If we find something that ties the real murder to someone else, or proves Len was set up, can you justify a stay?" She rubbed her temples. "I can forward your claim to the Department of Corrections and the governor's legal counsel, but they'll want documented evidence. If you have anything short of that, it's hearsay." At that moment, a prison guard hurried up to the warden. "Mom, phone call for you, the DA's office." Batista frowned. Perfect timing or terrible timing. She excused herself. Helen stepped closer to Delacroix, her voice low. "What if the phone call is about some new info?" He exhaled. "I can only hope. If not, I have to do whatever it takes. Start shouting about coerced witnesses, chain of custody errors. Even if it's not bulletproof, it might cause enough of a ruckus for a judge to delay the injection." Helen grabbed his arm, eyes desperate. "Please, if there's even a 1% chance we can't just let them kill him. He's an innocent man." She heard an urgent beat from Delacroix's phone. He checked a text message. Suddenly his features brightened, then turned serious. "They found something," he said, voice trembling. "My contact says Kincaid's bank accounts had large sums moving around the time of the murder, all masked through shell corporations. Possibly hush money or a frame. They're sending me the files right now. Helen felt faint. That might be enough to prove Len didn't have a motive, or that someone else was orchestrating everything. Delacroix grimaced. I need to see the details. Might show Len was framed. Or at least that Concade's murder was tied to bigger financial crimes. The question is, can we get the warden to stop the execution for a real look at the evidence? They didn't have to wait long for an answer. But Tista returned, her complexion pale as though she just received terrible news. Detective Del Aquam is Griggs. There's a possibility the DA might consider a temporary stay if we present credible evidence of misconduct, but everything must go through the governor's chain. Deliqua showed Batista the messages on his phone. Let me forward these documents to your office right now. Batista's jaw tightened. Send it. I'll personally call the governor's staff. Helen's eyes welled with cautious hope. We don't have much time, do we? Batista said nothing but motion for them to follow. They headed to her office, where a fax machine computer and phone lines were at her disposal. Dellup typed with frantic speed, transmitting data. Batista was already on the phone, voice tense. Yes, Governor's Council. I'm looking at new evidence that might suggest a wrongful conviction. We can't proceed until we confirm or deny these claims. Helen hovered near the door, heart pounding. Could this really happen? She pictured Len in that tiny cell, possibly saying goodbye to Eclipse for the last, and hovered near the door, heart pounding. Could this really happen? She pictured Len in that tiny cell, possibly saying goodbye to Eclipse for the last time. She looked at Delacroix, whose rigid posture betrayed guilt and desperation in equal measure. The next 10 minutes stretched into an agonizing silence. Finally, Batista hung up the phone. They need more, but they'll grant a 2-hour postponement for the lethal injection if we can produce a credible lead. Helen blinked. Only 2 hours. That's better than nothing, Delacroix said quietly. It buys us time. If we can confirm or expand on these transactions, maybe link them to a murder for hire angle, we can request a full stay. Confirm or expand on these transactions, maybe link them to a murder for hire angle. We can request a full stay. Batista's shoulders sagged in relief, though her expression remained grim. We have to keep this from the press for now. If we cause a stir before the governor's official decree, we risk chaos. Helen breathed out, a wave of hope crashing over her. So Len might not die this morning. Batista turned to her. If this evidence proves even partial exoneration, I'll personally stop it. But everything hinges on what your contact uncovers in the next 90 minutes. Helen nodded, tears brimming. She prayed that wasn't all a cruel, cosmic joke, that the damning case built against Len would finally break apart. Because if it didn't, her final memory of him would be the handshake, the tears, and watching him walk out of this world labeled as a murderer. Chaplain Morris stood at the door to Len's holding cell, offering a soft knock. Leonard, may I come in? Len, who was resting his hand on Eclipse's neck, turned and nodded. Resigned, yes, please. Gently, a guard escorted Eclipse outside the cell. The German shepherd struggled against the leash, not wanting to leave. Len blew the dog a kiss, and Eclipse let out a mournful whimper. Then the heavy door slid shut. Morris stepped in, wearing a plain clerical shirt with no tie. He and Len had become acquainted during weekly visits. Morris set a small Bible on the table. I hear they're preparing the chamber, the chaplain said in a low voice. But I wanted to be with you, unless you'd prefer otherwise. Len offered a sad smile. No, I thank you, chaplain. I'm glad you're here. They prayed together, or rather, Morris prayed, and Len listened, half numb, half hopeful. He thought about his late mother who raised him to believe in redemption. How would she feel, knowing her son was about to be executed for a crime he didn't commit? He felt more sorrow for her than for himself. Mid-prayer, the door clicked open again. Warden Batista appeared, speaking low and quick. Chaplain, I need a moment with Mr. Jackson. Morris gave Len a curious look and stepped aside. Batista approached, her face conflicted. Jackson, we've received new information that could question your involvement in Concade's murder. On that basis, I've secured a short postponement of the injection. 2 hours starting now. Len froze, scarcely able to process. Postponement. What does that mean? It means you're not dying at 9 o'clock. The procedure is on hold until 11. We need to verify the authenticity of new financial records that may indicate you were framed. If they check out, the governor could grant a formal stay and open an investigation. Lynn blinked, heart hammering. Are you serious? I've been saying I was innocent from the start. Now finally someone believes me. Batista egg-shelled. This is not confirmation of innocence yet, but we have reason to doubt the validity of your conviction. Detective Delacroix is pushing for a thorough review. Len's mind reeled. A swirl of emotions, relief, anger, hope, confusion. He found his hands shaking. He might live, at least for a few more hours. He glanced at Morris, who seemed equally stunned. "I'll remain here and continue to coordinate," Batista continued. "We'll keep you in this room under watch. If the evidence pans out, we'll stop the execution entirely." Len's eyes burned with tears he hadn't let out in years. A guard came in, pressing a phone receiver into Batista's hand. She answered, stepping aside. Meanwhile, Chaplain Morris whispered, "Leonard, this could be the miracle we prayed for." "I can't believe it," Len whispered back. "I didn't want to hope. If it falls through, how do I face the needle again?" Morris touched Len's shoulder with a comforting hand. "You face it with the same dignity you have all along, but let's have faith in the truth." Len rubbed his eyes. So many thoughts competed for attention. If I do live where I go, what about Eclipse? About me and Helen? Another wave of anxiety seized him. 5 years behind bars had destroyed his finances, his job, and his sense of normalcy. Even if he walked out a free man, he'd be starting from below zero. But overshadowing it all was the urgent realization, I might not be executed today. Batista hung up the phone, reapproaching with forced calm. "Jackson, you'll stay put. We'll update you as soon as possible." "Thank you," Len managed, voice trembling. "Thank you for giving me a chance." She pressed her lips into a thin line, clearly grappling with the moral gravity of the situation. Then she left, locking the door behind her. Morris resumed his seat near the bunk. "Would you like to talk about how you're feeling?" Len gave a shaky nod, though words seemed inadequate. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "Terrified to hope, terrified not to. I was ready to die. Now I have to wonder if I might live, and that's just as scary." The chaplain handed him a cup of water from the small sink. "It's understandable, but no matter what, you're not facing this alone." They sat in silence, occasionally interrupted by the beep of the overhead intercom or footsteps passing in the corridor. The clock ticked away the minutes, 9:15, 9:30, 9:45. Every passing moment was a paradox, a reprieve from death, but also a countdown to a possible second heartbreak if the evidence proved inconclusive. At 9:52, the door buzzed open again. This time it was a guard named Tuttle. He stepped aside as Eclipse burst into the room once more, straining on his leash, tail sweeping from side to side. Len stood stunned. "What's going on?" Tuttle shrugged. "Warden said you might want your dog in here while you wait. Figured you both could use the company." Len sank to his knees, hugging Eclipse. This small concession of humanity overwhelmed him. Eclipse winked happily, licking at his chin. Chaplain Morris smiled, stepping back to give them space. Len whispered into Eclipse's ear, "Maybe we're not done yet, boy. Maybe we still got time." And for the first time since his arrest, Len felt something he'd feared he'd never feel again. Genuine, unfiltered hope. Anton Delaquave paced around Warden Batista's office while she juggled phone calls with the governor's council. Helen Griggs sat in a chair by the window, too tense to speak. The clock on the wall read 1:05. They had less than an hour left in the postponement. The detective's phone buzzed. Another text from his contact. He read it, eyes widening. They traced the shell corporations in Kincaid's network to a man named Walton Green, a fixer known for orchestrating hits and staging evidence. Green disappeared shortly after Lynn Jackson's trial. Warden Batista placed a hand over the phone's mouthpiece. Fixer, so Kincaid might have hired this Green to deal with enemies, or Green was part of a bigger plot. Anton nodded. And if Kate wanted to frame Jackson, or if someone else hired Green to kill Kate and set up Jackson, that had put the entire case under suspicion. Batista pressed the phone back to her ear. "You hearing this, counselor?" "Wes, that's correct. Green was never even mentioned at trial." Helen's pulse thundered. She had never heard that name Walton Green in any case documents or news. "Is there anything linking Green to the night of the murder?" Anton glanced at the text again. "Not yet. We only know he moved large sums of money, possibly hush money. We needed direct link, like bank transfers near the time Kincaid died, or proof grews in Redwood City that night." Helen stood fist clenched. "How do we get that proof in the next 50 minutes? Before Anton could reply, the door opened. In stepped an older man with a stooped posture and a stern countenance. Helen recognized him from media coverage, Thomas Yeager, an assistant district attorney who had once championed the verdict against Len. She froze, uncertain why he was here. Yeager straightened, looking at Batista and Anton. "I was told you found new evidence that could halt this execution. I'd like to see it myself." Anton frowned but began explaining. "We've uncovered possible ties between Kincaid and a known fixer named Walton Green. Shell companies, secret bank transactions, enough to cast major doubt on Jackson's role." Yeager folded his arms. "I personally tried the case. Unless you have rock-solid proof that Jackson was nowhere near that scene, or that someone else committed the crime, I can't support a stay." Helen's eyes flashed. "You can't support a stay, even if there's doubt." The system is supposed to require guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Isn't the possibility of a hired killer more than enough? Wager pursed his lips. Miss Griggs, every convict claims innocence. Kincaid's murder had partial prints from Jackson on the weapon. From a knife that was once in Jackson's possession, Anton cut in. He admitted to owning a similar knife, but he swore it was stolen from his truck weeks prior. That was never investigated thoroughly. We had no reason to the prints matched, Yeager countered. Batista ended her phone call, exhaling sharply. Gentlemen, focus, we have limited time. The governor's council wants a direct link between Green and the crime scene or the victim. That would justify a stay. Otherwise, the injection proceeds at 11. Anton tapped impatiently on his phone, texting his contact. Find proof Green was in Redwood City the night of the murder. Helen turned to Jaeger, her voice quivering with emotion. You put an innocent man on death row. If we're right, you need to do the honorable thing and help stop this. For a moment, Jaeger's gaze flickered with something akin to doubt. He cleared his throat. Never want an innocent man to die. But speculation about a fixer isn't enough. Show me a hotel receipt, a security camera image, anything placing Green at the murder location. Batista's desk phone rang again. She grabbed it. Wes. Then her eyes lit up. Wes understood. I'll hold. She turned to them, covering the mouthpiece. Deliqua, your contact says they found a cluster of calls from Green's burner phone pinging near Redwood City on the night of the murder. They're pulling up location logs. Anton's heartbeat spiked. That's something? Where exactly? Batista relayed the question to whoever was on the line, listened and nodded. Then she set the phone down, eyes widening. He was within a mile of Kincaid's penthouse at the approximate time of death. The calls ended abruptly around midnight, which is the believed window of Kincaid's murder. Helen nearly gasped. That placed Green at the scene, or at least very close. Does that prove Green actually killed Kincaid? Not definitively, Yeager said, though the veneer of certainty in his tone was cracking. It does show an alternative suspect was there. Batista dialed the governor's council again, summarizing the new findings. After a tense exchange, she hung up. They'll call back with a decision. This might be enough for a short-term stay of execution. Jaeger muttered, it'd be a major embarrassment if Jackson's innocent. The entire trial was high profile. Helen pressed her palms to her temples. Embarrassment? Len's life is at stake. Anton stepped between them. Yeager, if you have any decency, you'll stand by the truth. I was the lead detective. I see now how the case was orchestrated. Someone wanted a quick conviction. We might have gotten played. I need to see the phone logs myself, Jaeger insisted, but his voice betrayed that he was rattled. Batista's office phone rang yet again. She snatched it up, listened in silence, then responded, Wes. Yes, understood. Thank you. She put the phone down, swallowing. The governor grants a temporary stay of execution. 48 hours to finalize the investigation. Helen slumped into the chair, tears of relief streaming down her face. 48 hours. That means Batista looked at her kindly. It means Leonard Jackson is not dying at 11 today. The execution is off the table, at least for the next 2 days while we confirm the evidence. If it proves strong enough, the entire conviction might be overturned. Anton closed his eyes, shoulder sagging. We did it in time, thank God. Yeager stood silent, mouth pressed in a thin line. Helen guessed his mind was spinning, trying to figure out how to salvage his own reputation. But in that moment, none of that mattered. Helen lunged forward and grabbed Batista's hand. Thank you, Warden, for not ignoring the possibility. Batista nodded. Never want to oversee the execution of a man who might be innocent. Deliqua, Miss Griggs, come with me. We need to inform Jackson of the stay. And so they left the office, hearts pounding with unexpected hope. For Helen, a heavy weight she'd carried for 5 years lifted. Len might live, and maybe, just maybe, the real killer or killers would be exposed. Len couldn't stop pacing his cell. Eclipse lay watching him, head on pause, occasionally swiveling those blue eyes to track his movements. Chaplain Morris had stepped out after the warden's last update, leaving Len to wrestle with the swirl of possibility on his own. He had started to fear that no further news meant the last-minute lead was a dead end. But then the metallic clank of the door jolted him. Warden Batista entered with Helen right behind her, and behind Helen was Anton Delacroix, a face Len recognized but had never spoken to since the trial. The detective's presence sent a spike of dread through Len's chest. Mr. Jackson, Batista began, her voice carefully composed. We've just heard from the governor's council. In light of new evidence, your execution has been stayed for 48 hours, pending further investigation. Len froze. Stayed. You mean I'm not? Batista offered a small nod. You're not being executed today. A profound relief overtook Len. His knees nearly buckled. He might have collapsed if Helen hadn't rushed forward to steady him. The tension that had built to a razor edge suddenly loosened, leaving him dizzy. "I'm so happy," Helen choked out, tears spilling. She pulled him into an embrace. Eclipse jumped up, barking as though celebrating the moment. Delacroix cleared his throat. "Jackson, I'm Detective Anton Delacroix. I was the lead investigator on your case. I'm here because I'm sorry. There may have been an orchestrated effort to frame you." Len's breath caught. He had always suspected corruption, or at least negligence, but hearing it openly admitted by the detective who built the case was surreal. "I told the courts from day one, I never killed Kincaid," Len said, voice trembling. "No, after 5 years." Delacroix lowered his gaze. "I had doubts for a while. I failed to act sooner. No excuses, I'm working to make it right." Helen gently placed a hand on Len's arm. "We found strong evidence that points to someone else, possibly a hired killer, Walton Green. He was near the scene, had ties to Kincaid. Financial records we never saw before." Len let out a long, shaky exhalation. "So, what happens now?" Batista answered, "Investigators will dig deeper. If the new evidence proves your innocence, you could be fully exonerated." Helen squeezed Len's hand. "You might be free, not just alive, free." He stared at her, overwhelmed. For years, freedom was a mirage. Now it hovered within reach. But with the possibility came terror. What if it slips away again? Eclipse let out a short bark, as if to break the tension. The German shepherd then placed a paw on Len's thigh, demanding attention. Len knelt to ruffle the dog's ears, tears in his eyes. "Hey buddy, we get more time." "See." The warden glanced at our watch. "Protocol dictates we move you out of the final holding area, back to a maximum security cell, but it won't be death row. You'll have a hearing in front of a judge soon. Detective Delacroix and Miss Griggs can gather more evidence in that time. If all goes well, the DA may drop the charges entirely." Len rose slowly, turning to Batista. "Thank you for giving me a chance, for letting me see Eclipse, for not ignoring the lead." She seemed to weigh her response. "I just did what I hope anyone in my position would do. I'm relieved you may be innocent, and I'm sorry for everything you've been through." Helen brushed tears away. "I'll keep visiting." "I'm sorry for everything you've been through." Helen brushed tears away. "I'll keep visiting. I'll fight for you." A swirl of complicated emotions rushed through Land. Happiness, fear, gratitude. He reached out and took Helen's hand, ignoring the presence of the warden and detective. "Helen, if this is real, if I really get out." He paused, eyes flicking to Eclipse. "God, I don't even know how to start over." Helen smiled through her tears. "We'll figure it out, one day at a time." But he's to signal the guard who stood just outside. "It's time to transfer Mr. Jackson to a different wing." Her gaze shifted to Eclipse. "We'll allow the dog to remain during the paperwork, but then Miss Griggs must take him home. We'll keep you updated." Len nodded. He bent down, hugging Eclipse. "I'll see you soon, boy," he murmured. He hoped those words were true and not some cruel postponement. A moment later, the guard escorted Helen and Eclipse into the hallway. Land managed a small wave before the door closed, locking him back inside. But this time the cell didn't feel like an execution chamber. It felt like a place to wait, a cell with an end in sight. Delacroix lingered. "Jackson, I know you have every reason to hate me, but I'll do everything in my power to ensure the truth comes out." Len looked at him with wary eyes. "I don't hate you. I'm angry, yes. I lost 5 years. But if you can help set things right." Delacroix inhaled sharply. "I will." Then he too stepped out, leaving Len alone in an emotional whirlwind. He sank onto the bunk, shaking from pent-up adrenaline. In the corner of the cell, he noticed the remains of the burger he hadn't eaten. His appetite still hadn't returned, but maybe later, after the shock wore off, he'd realize he was free from imminent death. Perhaps then he could eat. Dream plan. Outside he heard distant echoes, guards, radio chatter, the hustle of prison life continuing. But beneath it all, a subtle shift. The lethal injection that had overshadowed the morning was canceled. And for the first time in years, Len felt like part of the living world, not a condemned spirit waiting for oblivion. News of the state time in years, Len felt like part of the living world. Not a condemned spirit waiting for oblivion. News of the state execution spread quickly, sparking outrage and relief in equal measure. Protesters outside Ironwood Prison were initially stunned. The group chanting for justice for Kincaid accused the governor of spineless adulation. The anti-death penalty faction cheered, holding signs that read, "Life wins today," and "Innocent until proven guilty." Helen navigated through the throng, Eclipse panting at her side. Reporters swarmed around her, cameras rolling and microphones thrust in her direction. "Miss Griggs, how do you feel about the stay of execution?" "Miss Griggs, how do you feel about the stay of execution? Do you have proof Leonard Jackson was framed? Will you push for compensation if he's exonerated?" Helen put a hand up, shielding her face. "Please, no comment right now," she said, voice trembling. I'm just trying to get home. Let us pass." In the swirling chaos, a man in a crisp suit stepped in front of her, blocking the path. "Excuse me, Miss Griggs. Eric Stain from Channel 7, if you have a moment." But then, a firm grip on Helen's shoulder pulled her away. "Move, people, let her through," demanded a tall figure in a police uniform. An officer parted the crowd, allowing Helen and Eclipse safe passage to her pickup truck. She thanked the officer quietly. Once in the truck, she locked the doors and sat for a minute, heart pounding. Eclipse winced as if sensing her distress. "We did it," she murmured to the dog. "We bought Lynn time." Sighing, Helen started the engine and pulled away from the prison. She felt enormous relief overshadowed by an unsettling fact. The city was going to be torn apart by this scandal. For 5 years, everyone believed or pretended to believe the open and shut narrative. Now the cracks were visible, and someone was responsible for orchestrating it. Her phone pinged. A message from an unknown number. "I can help prove Leonard's innocence. Contact me." She frowned. Could it be a crank tip? The city was full of opportunists who might want to exploit a high-profile case. She decided to forward it to Delacqua later. Eventually, she made it to her small home on the edge of town. The living room felt claustrophobic, half-packed boxes stacked against the walls. She had never fully settled in after moving out of the apartment she once shared with Lynn, uncertain if Redwood City was even home anymore. Eclipse pranced around looking for his water bowl. Helen filled it and set it down, then collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. She was relieved, yet her nerves were frayed. 48 hours, she whispered. "We have 48 hours to find conclusive proof." Eclipse lapped water, then patted over to rest his chin on the couch cushion beside her. She stroked his head absolutely. "We can't fail him now." Meanwhile, Detective Delacqua drove across town to the Redwood City Police Department. He intended to confront old colleagues, rummage through old files. He needed to see the chain of evidence logs, the witness interviews, everything. At a stoplight, he scrolled through the new data from his contact. The phone logs for Walton Green were significant. Calls to and from an untraceable number, near Kincaid's penthouse, on the night of the murder. The final call was at 12:07 a.m., minutes before Kincaid's estimated time of death. Then the phone went dark, never used again. Pulling into the station's parking lot, Anton braced himself. "They're going to hate me for overturning a major conviction." But he was well beyond that concern. He marched in, past the suspicious glares of uniforms who recognized him. He found a small records room in the basement, confronted the clerk with a request for all Kincaid murder case materials. "Those have been archived," the clerk huffed. "Not standard for you to open them up without permission." He flashed his badge. "This is official. We have a potential wrongful conviction." The clerk's face paled. He rummaged through a computer system, then disappeared into the archives. After about 10 minutes, the clerk returned with several dusty boxes. "Sign here," he said, thrusting a form forward. Delacqua scribbled his name. He hauled the boxes into an unused interrogation room and shut the door. The stale smell of old paper and the scratch of cardboard underscored how neglected these records were. Some were duplicates of what he already knew. Photos of the crime scene, statements from neighbors who heard a shout around midnight. Some statements were contradictory, but the prosecution had cherry-picked what best supported Len's guilt. Then he found a report labeled Crime Scene Forensic Analysis #2, dated 3 days after the murder. He had never seen a #2 before. He only remembered one official forensic report at trial. This second one might have been withheld. He opened it. Partial, full footprints unaccounted for, not matching Leonard Jackson or the victim. Signs of forced entry from a window leading to the fire escape. Traces of gunpowder residue not consistent with the discovered murder weapon. Anton's pulse hammered. Kincaid was allegedly stabbed to death. Where did gunpowder residue come from? This second report was never introduced as evidence. He found a final note. Due to chain of custody issues, these samples deemed inconclusive and not forwarded to primary case file. He slammed the folder shut, blood boiling. This pointed to a potential second assailant, or at least an alternate method of assault. If Kincaid had been threatened with a firearm or a second person fired a shot that missed, it drastically changed the narrative. Leaving the station with these unapproved records might be tricky, but Anton figured if the brass wanted to stonewall, they'd do it anyway. He approached the clerk. "I'm taking these, log them as active review. Put my name as lead." The clerk opened his mouth to protest, then read the determination in Anton's eyes and said nothing. Returning to his car, Anton's mind spun. The overshadowed evidence of footprints, forced entry, gunpowder. Someone had systematically buried or ignored these findings. If he shared them with the DA or Warden Batista, it would further confirm the investigation was corrupted. Another piece in the puzzle that might save Len. He glanced at the time, 12:30 p.m. They had until around 11 m 2 days from now for the official stay. He prayed it was enough. Thomas Yeager stood at the window of his law office in downtown Redwood City, phone pressed to his ear. As the assistant DA who prosecuted Len, he was in damage control mode. "I understand, sir," he said into the phone. "We're conducting a thorough re-examination." A pause. "Yes, absolutely. My team will assist in any way possible." He hung up, slamming the phone down. That call was from the elected district attorney, threatening to throw Jaeger under the bus if Len Jackson was indeed innocent. Political careers were on the line. Len's trial had been a highlight of Yeager's tenure. If it unraveled, the DA's office might blame Yeager's handling of evidence. Yeager took a moment to reflect on the case 5 years ago. The victim, Raymond Kincaid, had been a powerful local figure, well connected with city officials. The possibility that anyone but Len was guilty never seemed to cross official minds. Yet details were nagging Jaeger now, especially the newly surfaced phone logs and rumors of withheld forensics. His door burst open, revealing a short, wary man with anxious eyes. Bryce Corrigan, a junior attorney. "Sir, the Redwood Press is running a front-page story tomorrow. Detective Delacroix uncovers missing forensics in Jackson case. They want your comment." Yeager's eyes widened. "Missing forensics. That must be the second crime scene report I never saw." Delacroix is digging deep. Corrigan nodded. "They claim footprints and gunpowder residue were never mentioned at trial. If that's true, it's a huge blow to the prosecution's integrity." Cursing under his breath, Jaeger paced. "Get in touch with the forensics lab. I want to know who handled that second report. And contact Walton Green's last known associates. If Green really was in Redwood City the night Kincaid died, we need to confirm or refute it. Right now we look incompetent, or worse." Corrigan scribbled notes, "And if we confirm Green's involvement." Jaeger shut his eyes, feeling a headache throb. "Then we have to admit we might have convicted the wrong man. We shift blame to Kate's circle or the investigating officers who missold us. That's politics." Corrigan left and Jaeger sank into his chair. The once certain narrative crumbled. He replied the trial in his mind. How confident he was in that partial fingerprint on the knife. How Len's alleged motive of revenge for a business deal gone sour had been sold to the jury. The victim's actual enemies, Kincaid's shady partners, were never mentioned. He wondered if he was complicit in a cover-up or simply blind. A memory struck him. The day before the trial, a major property investor had come to his office, praising his dedication. Did that investor push to keep the bigger story buried? He glared at the phone. Maybe it was time to do something right for once. If the evidence pointed to a frame job, he'd rather help correct it than be labeled the attorney who executed an innocent man. Grabbing his coat, Jaeger marched out. He had one place to go. The law enforcement data center where the digital traces of phone calls and financial records might exist. If he found anything linking Green or someone else to Kincaid murder, he'd hand it over to Delacroix. Atonement, possibly. But it might also be the only way to save his career back at the maximum security wing of Ironwood. Len sat on a narrow bunk, restless. It was close to midnight, the overhead fluorescent buzzing. The day had been a whirlwind, from near certain death to an official stay. He'd been questioned by prison officials, asked to sign new forms. Chaplain Morris had checked in. Eclipse and Helen were sent home hours ago. He tried to sleep, but the swirl of thoughts made it impossible. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. A guard paused at the bars. "Jackson, you awake?" Len sat up. "Yeah," he said quietly. The guard had a kindly look. "Just want to say I'm glad you're still around. Rumors are you might be innocent." Len managed a small smile. "Thanks." The guard nodded and continued his patrol. Len lay back down, closing his eyes. Images of Eclipse flashed in his mind. The first time he saw the German Shepherd at a rescue shelter, tail wagging behind cold steel bars, begging for a chance. We were both behind bars once. Glenn thought grimly, but he got out a lot sooner. Gradually, exhaustion overcame him. When he drifted into sleep, it was the deepest slumber he'd had in years. He woke before dawn, startled by a dream in which he roamed Redwood Creek with Eclipse off leash, free as the wind. Sitting up, he noticed a guard at the door again. "Jackson," the guard said, "Wade just got word. You're being moved out of maximum security, release holding, pending a hearing." Len's pulse quickened. "Already?" "Looks that way. They want you ready in an hour." Len stood, heart pounding. This had to be a sign that the evidence was swaying officials toward clearing him. Pre-release. The words filled him with an electric sense of possibility. Ironwood Prison's Oster transport van carried Len to the county courthouse. No crowds greeted him this time, just a quiet morning. 2 officers led him through a side entrance away from the public gaze. The building's marble floors shone under bright lights. It was surreal to tread them in shackles. Helen sat on a bench in the hallway wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She rushed to him, ignoring the guard's protests, and quickly grasped his hands. Eclipse wasn't allowed, but from the drool patch on her sweater, Lynn could tell she'd left the dog in the car, or at home not long ago. "Are you okay?" she asked breathlessly. Len nodded, more at peace than he had been in a long time. "I'm better than yesterday. What's going on?" "An emergency hearing before Judge Alvarez," she explained. "Detective Delacqua, the warden, and believe it or not, Assistant D.A. Yeager are cooperating to lay out the new evidence." His mouth parted in surprise. "Yeager is helping." She shrugged. "Sounds like he's realized it's bigger than just saving face. If they confirm that second forensic report was suppressed, the judge might release you on bail or even drop the charges if the evidence is overwhelming." Lynn squeezed Helen's hand. "You stayed up all night too, didn't you?" She swallowed. "I'd do it 1,000,000 times if it meant saving you." A bailiff appeared. "Let's go. The judge is ready." In the courtroom, a hush reigned. Judge Alvarez presided with a stern face. Len was guided to the defense table. Surprisingly, the man sitting next to him was an attorney from the public defender's office, someone new who had been assigned after Len's original lawyer retired. This attorney looked determined. Across the aisle, Yeager sat alone, no longer exuding the arrogance he had shown 5 years ago. Detective Delacroix was behind him holding folders. Warden Batista and 2 representatives from the governor's council were also present. It felt like a strange coalition of parties once enemies, now compelled by the gravity of possible injustice. Alvarez surveyed the room. "We're convened on short notice to address newly surfaced evidence regarding the conviction of Leonard Jackson. Mr. Yeager, as the prosecuting attorney in that original trial, please summarize the situation." Yeager stood, cleared his throat. "Your Honor, since the stay of execution was granted yesterday, significant findings have emerged. First, phone records suggest a suspect named Walton Green, known for violent contracts, was within 1 mile of the victim's location at the time of death. Second, an apparent second forensic report from the crime scene was never submitted at trial. It indicates footprints not matching Miss Jackson and possible firearm residue. There's also evidence that the partial fingerprint on the alleged murder weapon may have come a separate occasion and was possibly transferred." A low murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge's eyebrows rose. "You're admitting this was withheld, courtroom?" The judge's eyebrows rose. "You're admitting this was withheld." Yeager's tone conveyed both embarrassment and sincerity. "I can't confirm who withheld it, but it never reached me or the defense." Given these developments, the state concede Mr. Jackson's conviction no longer stands on solid ground." An audible gas escaped from behind Lynn. "Maybe Helen or someone else." Lynn just stared at Yeager, stunned by the enormity of his words. Judge Alvarez turned to the defense side. "Mr. Botcher, as Mr. Jackson's current counsel, do you have a motion?" Botcher, Len's new attorney, rose. "Yes, Your Honor. We move to vacate the conviction and release Mr. Jackson immediately, pending potential retrial or dismissal. The state has effectively admitted to material flaws in the prosecution's evidence." Alvarez's gaze flicked from the defense to Yeager. "Mr. Yeager, does the state oppose vacating the conviction?" After a tense pause, Yeager's voice wavered. "We do not. The state will not proceed with the original verdict." The judge leaned forward. "Then I see no reason to hold Mr. Jackson further." He banged his gavel. "Motion granted. Mr. Jackson, you are hereby released on your own recognizance, pending any new charges the state might bring. But from what I see, they have none. This court apologizes for the miscarriage of justice you've endured." The sound of the gavel echoed in Len's ears like thunder. The guards removed his shackles. In that surreal moment, he felt the entire world tilt on its axis. Applause broke out from Helen and others in the gallery. Tears blurred Len's vision. He turned to Helen. She rushed forward. In front of everyone, they embraced. Delacqua and Batista exchanged relieved glances. Even Yeager looked somberly relieved. Len took a shaky breath. No longer a condemned man or even a prisoner. He was free. The building that once represented insurmountable authority now felt like a place of liberation. He looked at his wrists, raw from the cuffs 5 years. Helen whispered, "You're coming home, Len." He kissed her brow, scarcely believing it. He whispered back, "Let's go home." They emerged onto the courthouse steps into a bright midday sun. Helen was on Len's left arm, guiding him gently, as though he might float away. Camera crews stood ready. News anchors gave live updates, capturing the moment of a man once condemned to die, now stepping out a free citizen. Eclipse waited in Helen's pickup. As soon as Helen opened the door, the German shepherd leapt out, bounding toward Len in joyous arcs. Bystanders gaped at the big silver dog so thrilled at his owner's release. Lynn crouched, burying his face in Eclipse's fur. The tension of the last 5 years poured out in sobs that he couldn't and wouldn't hold back. Helen and Lynn decided not to address the press waiting for a statement. They wanted space to breathe. The crowd parted as they navigated to the truck. No longer forced to drive at breakneck speed, Helen eased through the city streets, heart soaring. Lynn stared out the window studying Redwood City as if for the first time. Some stores had closed, replaced by coffee shops or restaurants. A large new building overshadowed the block where he once lived. The speed of change owed him. The world moved on without me, he thought. A pang of sorrow mingling with hope, Helen read the anxiety in his face. I'm here, she said softly. We'll figure it out, all the changes. You'll have time now. He nodded, resting a hand on Eclipse's head. The dog panted happily between them. Let's go to your place first if that's okay. I don't even have a place to stay. Of course, Helen said, voice breaking with compassion. It's your home too, if you want it. He gave her a grateful look. I do, he murmured. They reached the modest house, a single-story bungalow with a small yard. Inside, boxes stacked in corners reminded Len that Helen's life had been in flux too. He walked around slowly, eyes catching on her furniture, her pictures. One showed him and her, smiling on a hiking trip not long before the arrest. She must have kept it, even after all these years. Helen led him to a spare bedroom that was half storage, half guest room. I was going to move soon, but if you'd prefer we stay, I'll break my lease if it makes sense. Len shook his head. No, let's not upend everything. I'm just grateful not to be behind bars. She exhaled shakily. You'll need clothes. We can shop tonight or tomorrow, and there's so much to do. Reporters want statements. Attorneys want to talk to you about lawsuits for wrongful conviction. Later, he interrupted gently. Please, I just need a moment. Helen nodded, tears glistening. Take all the time you want. When she left, Eclipse patted in. The German Shepherd sniffed the boxes, then circled back to lean against Len's leg. Len sat on the small bed, letting out a trembling breath. I'm free, he repeated in his mind, trying to let the truth settle. He parted the curtains. The yard outside displayed a scraggly lawn fence. Beyond that, a neighbor's garden, a perfectly ordinary slice of life. It was so starkly different from the claustrophobic prison yard. Eclipse licked Lynn's elbow, and Lynn ruffled the German Shepherd's fur. We're together again, boy. A phone vibration broke the silence. Checking the phone Helen had given him, her old spare, Lynn saw a text from an unknown number. There's still a target on your back. Given him, her old spare. Len saw a text from an unknown number. There's still a target on your back. Kincaid's partners know you're free. Be careful. He frowned. Another wave of dread welled up. This nightmare might not be over. The conspirators behind Kincaid's murder and the frame job were still at large. If they wanted to silence him, but I won't live in fear, he resolved. Not after surviving 5 years on death row. Pocketing the phone, he decided to join Helen in the living room, determined to press forward. The next chapter of his life had begun. Uncertain but shining with promise, the days that followed Len's release were a blur of legal steps, sudden headlines, and personal adjustments. The Redwood City District Attorney's Office announced a full investigation into Raymond Kincaid's murder case, with new leads suggesting that Kincaid's business partners might have orchestrated a scheme to eliminate him and frame Land as an easy scapegoat. Detective Delacroix, now somewhat of a citywide hero for uncovering the truth, led a new task force. He uncovered a chain of bribes paid to certain corrupt officials, spanning the police department and potentially even judges. The deeper they dug, the more it looked like an elaborate conspiracy that Kincaid tried to break free from, or possibly that someone else triggered to remove Kincaid from power. Helen found herself caught between relief and lingering anger. She watched Lynn struggle to adapt to normal life. Small tasks like buying groceries overwhelmed him. The cluster of strangers in an aisle triggered flashbacks to claustrophobic prison lines. She tried to keep Eclipse near him for comfort, but the dog couldn't go everywhere. One morning, Len woke up drenched in sweat from a nightmare. He'd been dreaming that the execution was still set, but nobody told him about the stay. The guards dragged him to the chamber anyway. He found Helen in the kitchen making coffee. She noticed his trembling hands. Bad dream. Yeah, he mumbled, sitting at the table. Eclipse padded over to his side, tail wagging in quiet sympathy. Helen pulled up a chair. I've been reading about therapy programs for exonerated individuals. The Innocence Foundation has counseling. Len raised a hand. I know you mean well, I just need time. Let me handle it my own way. She nodded, respecting his need to process. Of course, but you're not alone, okay? He gave a faint smile. I know, he said softly. That afternoon, Delacroix called. "We've identified and arrested Walton Green," he said, excitement creeping into his usually stoic tone. He was hiding out in a property outside state lines. "We found him with a fake passport. Once we gather evidence connecting him to Kincaid's death, we'll confirm your innocence beyond any doubt." Len's pulse soared. "He'll testify I was framed. Too soon to tell. But we're not letting him walk. Also, the higher-ups want to talk restitution. Don't be surprised if the state offers a settlement for wrongful imprisonment." Lynn leaned against the kitchen wall. "I'm not after money, man. I just want my life back." "I know," Deliqua said sympathetically. "Sometimes a settlement is the only official apology they can give." Len said goodbye, feeling a strange hollow sensation. 5 years could never be repaid, no matter how large a sum. Memories of lost wages, emotional trauma, missed moments with Helen, birthdays, holidays. They were priceless. But at least the truth was emerging. 2 weeks went by. Green, under intense pressure, cracked. He admitted that Kincaid was about to expose corruption tied to powerful interests. So Green staged a murder scene using a knife known to have Len's prints. The deeper conspirators, those who wanted Kincaid out of the picture, paid Green handsomely to orchestrate the frame job. Green named 3 wealthy businessmen involved in Redwood City's real estate empire. When the news hit the public, Redwood City erupted. Investigations launched against top officials. Assistant DA Yeager gave a press statement apologizing publicly to Len Jackson. He insisted he never knowingly suppressed the second forensic report. Regardless, his career was effectively over. Len watched the broadcast with tears in his eyes. Helen's hand clasped in his, Eclipse at their feet. His name was finally cleared, but the swirling emotions inside him weren't pure triumph. Too much had been lost. Yet the sight of crooked figures being held accountable offered closure. 1 month later, the morning sun shone upon Redwood Creek's walking trail. Len stood with Eclipse leash in hand, gazing at the water glinting under golden rays. Helen walked beside him, a gentle breeze lifting her hair. For the first time since his release, they decided to revisit a spot that once symbolized their dreams, the creekside park where they'd walked Eclipse daily before everything went wrong. Len inhaled the crisp air. He wore a plain t-shirt and jeans, feeling the simple pleasure of existing without walls around him. Eclipse let out a happy bark, trotting along the gravel path. The German shepherd's tail swished from side to side, pausing occasionally to sniff at wildflowers. Helen stepped closer. "You okay?" He nodded, eyes reflecting the sunlight. "I still have nightmares, but this helps. Being out here with you in Eclipse." She smiled, giving him a sideways hug. "We're thinking of adopting another dog, so Eclipse can have a friend." She teased gently, recalling a plan they'd once had. "But maybe we'll settle one thing at a time." Len's gaze fell on her fondly. "Yeah, one day at a time." He turned to watch the creek swirl downstream, carrying leaves and twigs. That unstoppable current reminded him of how life moves forward, unstoppable. In the distance, a figure approached. It was Deliqua, wearing casual clothes and a slight grin. He'd asked if he could join them on this walk. "Morning," the detective said, raising a hand. Len gave a friendly nod. The tension he once felt seeing Deliqua was gone. In the past month, they built a bridge of mutual understanding. "Thanks for coming." Deliqua crouched to pet Eclipse. "Hey, buddy." Looking up at Len, he said, "You hear the final indictment came down. Those 3 businessmen Green implicated were arrested. The entire ring's unraveling." Lennox hailed a breath of relief. "So it's over then," Deliqua shrugged. "There may be more, but the big players are done. Redwood City owes you an apology on every level. And me personally." Lennox crouched to rub Eclipse's ears, letting silence hang. Finally, he said, "We can't change the past, but we can shape the future. If you want to make it up to me, keep investigating wrongful convictions. Don't let this happen again." Deliqua nodded solemnly. "Deal." Helen let Eclipse off the leash for a moment, watching him scamper through the grass. Then she turned to Lynn. "We got that letter from the State Compensation Board. They're offering a settlement for your 5 years of wrongful imprisonment." Lynn shrugged. "Money's not everything, but it'll help us start over. Maybe we can move somewhere with a yard for Eclipse. Maybe I can set up a non-profit or something for others in the same situation." She reached for his hand. "I think that's a wonderful idea." He squeezed her fingers gently. "Without you, without Eclipse, I'm not sure I would have survived this." Helen's eyes glistened. "You never left my heart, no matter how bleak it got." Warmth flooded Len's chest. He remembered the hopeless nights in prison, conjuring her face and the German shepherd's bright eyes just to endure. Now that love was real and tangible, strolling with him by the creek in the morning sun. Delacour walked a few steps away, letting them share the private moment. Helen placed a hand on Lynn's cheek, her voice trembling with emotion. "We lost so much time. Let's not waste another second." Lynn leaned in, pressing his forehead against hers. No more wasted time. Eclipse returned, bounding around them in circles, an emblem of unstoppable life. The dog barked once an invitation to keep moving. They laughed, falling into step behind him, forging a new path on ground that no longer felt cursed by injustice. In that dawnlight among the rustling leaves and gentle current of the creek, Len Jackson's story reached a moment of resolution. An end to the darkest chapter, and the start of something brighter. The city around them would continue reeling from scandals and revelations, but here at least, there was transformation and hope. Len clasped Helen's hand, Eclipse dashed ahead. The path was wide open, the horizon bright, and in the rhythmic hum of nature, Len found a faith in tomorrow he never thought he'd hold again. They pressed forward, footprints side by side along the trail, carrying with them a shared history of pain, but also a promise of healing. Together, at last, with a dog who had been the key to an innocence, almost lost in the darkness, beneath the softened skies of a world that once turned its back on them, Len Jackson, and Eclipse walked forward, not as prisoner and pet, but as two survivors bound by quiet resilience and unspoken grace. Eclipse, with her watchful eyes and steadfast spirit, did more than return to Len. She carried the truth back with her. In doing so, she became the voice for a man silenced by injustice, the steady heartbeat of hope in a life all but forgotten. Len's redemption didn't come from grand decorations or last-minute luck. It rose from Eclipse's unwavering loyalty, Helen's relentless love, and the courage of those who dared to question what others accepted. Through them, a man condemned was brought home, not just to freedom but to meaning. This story reminds us, it's not always the loudest cries that change the course of fate. Sometimes it's the ones who wait, who watch, who stay. In Eclipse, Len found something unbreakable, and in holding on to her, he held on to everything that truly mattered.